A very good evening, everyone. I'm Brendan Madigan, owner of Alpenglow Sports in Tahoe City, California. It is also my great honor to be your host tonight. To say I'm excited to welcome all of you to the kickoff show of our 15th annual Alpenglow Winter Speaker Series would be a massive understatement. I'm absolutely thrilled to have you all here this evening. These nights, even if they are virtual, are some of my favorite gatherings of the entire winter. For those of you who are new to the speaker series and haven't had the opportunity to join us, I'd like to extend a very warm welcome for joining us here tonight. The Alpenglow Winter Speaker Series is an eagerly anticipated winter tradition here in North Lake Tahoe, and the format is pretty simple. 5 times per winter, a premier outdoor athlete presents an inspirational tale of mountain adventure that is free and open to all ages. Past speakers have included the biggest names in our business, including Alex Honnold, Lynn Hill, Jeremy Jones, of course Dave Nettle, Tommy Caldwell, Hillary O'Neill, Jim Morrison, Glenn Plake, and many more. Now, the Winter Speaker Series has a twofold goal. First is to inspire and motivate local athletes, and now athletes everywhere, to pursue their own dreams in the mountains. And second, to educate about and raise funds for nonprofit organizations making a tangible difference in the North Lake Tahoe and Truckee communities. Over 15 years, raffle and bar proceeds, along with donations from our anonymous philanthropic group, the Donor Party, have raised more than $500,000 for local nonprofits making a tangible difference right here in North Lake Tahoe. Now, as you can imagine, we couldn't put on an event of this scale by ourselves. We have some absolutely amazing supporters who allow us to come together for free, and I would be remiss to not take a moment and thank them. We all owe them a great deal of gratitude for allowing us to come together and dance this beautiful dance. We're lucky to have Peak Design as our presenting sponsor of the 15th annual Winter Speaker Series. We're super grateful that Peak Design sees value in our mission and truly believes in the power of adventure storytelling. They also undoubtedly make the best camera and travel accessories on the market for every adventure, so definitely check them out. We also have some awesome giveaways this evening that have been generously provided by Nerona, Lakey, Keith Davis Aviation, the Lost Trail Lodge, Little Truckee Ice Creamery, Kelly Brothers Painting, and Simple Power Solar. We also have a group of committed, passionate, and community-minded local sponsors, including Tahoe Mountain Realty, Porter Simon Law Group, Mike Schwartz and the Backcountry, Alpenglow and the Backcountry will always be family, KTKE 101.5 Truckee Tahoe Radio, Daniel Cates from Technical Equipment Cleaners, the team at the Tahoe Weekly, Katie Rice and her team at Guild Mortgage, Evolve Design Works, Mount Lincoln Construction, Sierra Nevada Brewing, and Smartwool. And guys, these are companies that honestly could put their marketing dollars elsewhere, but they align on an emotional and personal level with our speaker series. And so we're so grateful for their continued support. And tonight's nonprofit beneficiary is the Truckee Donner Land Trust. This is a group that's doing amazing things for stewardship and our community. And so I'd like to welcome Kate Frankfurt from the Land Trust to tell us a little bit about their organization and the difference they are making in our community.
My name is Kate Frankfurt, and on behalf of the staff and the board of the Truckee Donner Land Trust, I wanted to thank you, Brendan and the Alpenglow team, wanted to thank the donor party and all of you joining tonight, and of course the amazing Dave Nettle for bringing us here and making us the recipient of this wonderful event. 30 years ago, a passionate group of hikers gathered together around a kitchen table. Coldstream Canyon near Donner Lake was under threat from logging, and they wanted to make sure that this beautiful piece of land would be preserved and protected forever. So together with their community, they raised $150,000 to preserve that 160-acre piece of property. And the Truckee Donner Land Trust was born. 30 years later, our small but mighty staff of 7, together with a very dynamic board, has protected and preserved over 40,000 acres of land and created and maintained 45 miles of trails. And we're still going strong. We're guided by our North Star, which is the Northern Sierra Checkerboard, a remnant of the Civil War era in which Abraham Lincoln deeded every other parcel of land to the railroad companies with the idea that they would then sell that land and fund what was the expensive establishment of the Transcontinental Railroad. Our purpose is to buy back those parcels of land, one by one as they become available today. Our focused attention is on fulfilling our vision of a large-scale connected band of open space, protected and preserved forever, and right outside your back door. If you hike, bike, rock climb, cross-country ski, snowshoe, or camp, you've probably done that on land protected and preserved by the Truckee Donner Land Trust. If you went camping at Weber Lake this summer, if you've gone cross-country skiing at Royal Gorge, if you've gone rock climbing at Blackwall on Donner Summit, if you've mountain biked on the Donner Lake Rim Trail or walked through the Jewel of the Sierra, Lower Carpenter Valley, you've done that on land protected and preserved by the Truckee Donner Land Trust. Today, we're working to preserve 26 acres right in the heart of downtown Truckee, with a bridge connecting downtown's core to what we call the wild side. Trails will connect every neighborhood to one another. The Legacy Trail will extend. There will be access to Sawtooth Trails, Big Chief, Jackass Trails, and more. We can't wait to have you be a part of that project. It's definitely going to be a game changer for Truckee. All of this is made possible by a combination of public and private funding. The private funding helps to unlock the public funding, and no donation is too small. Last year, $20 donations combined to a total of over $70,000, allowing us to repair trails after a really hard winter and also serving as a portion of a down payment on a property we'd be eyeing for quite a while. Our community has changed dramatically in recent months, and our work has never been more important. Whether you've been living here for years and years or you are a new member of our community, having access to open space is what has brought us all here. Imagine what we could do together. Go to our website, sign up for our e-newsletter, make a donation. We're already planning our next project, and we really want you to be a part of it. Don't miss it, and please enjoy tonight.
Thank you, Kate. We absolutely love the work you and the Land Trust are doing, and we're so stoked to support you. This is the time of evening where normally at Squaw, I, along with some probably teenage kids, would throw out a bunch of hats in the crowd, but this is our new reality. So we do have an amazing raffle, but before we get into that, I want to encourage everyone to keep their eyes on the chat feature. As questions come in that Dave and I will answer, I should say Dave will answer, I'll pose at the end of the show, will be upvoted, and we'll select a certain number of questions to answer at the end of the show. So chat away. It's a fun feature in these virtual events, and it's very team building, if you will. So we also have the ability to keep donating to the Land Trust. You'll see a button at the bottom of the page. If you're so inclined and moved, feel free. 100% of the proceeds tonight go to the Land Trust. So with that, let's start this raffle. The first item is a $25 gift certificate to the one and only Alpenglow Sports. And the winner of that is going to be, drum roll, John Fisher. And guys, we'll communicate with all the winners after the show. Next up, we've got a Dynafit trucker, Tahoe Backcountry Alliance buff, and a Dynafit ski strap. And we're going to give that to Jim Sadak. Jim is a gangster kayaker. You guys got to meet Jim if you haven't already. Congrats to him and Debbie. Next up, we have a $25 gift certificate to the Little Truckee Ice Creamery at Donner Lake. This is a fairly new business add-on to Donner Lake, and Kenny and his team are just amazing. So the winner of that is going to be, names are flying past me like Star Wars, Maggie Fillmore. Congrats, Maggie Fillmore. Next up, we have a his and her Black Diamond beanie set, valued at about $60. And the winner of that is Mathieu Miller. Sexy French name. Matthew Miller. I pronounced it correctly. Okay, next up, we have a $50 gift certificate to the shop here at Alpenglow Sports, as well as a $25 gift certificate to Little Truckee Ice Creamery at Donner Lake. John Fisher, he must have bought a lot of tickets. And normally during these shows I get heckled, or I should say the kids drawing the raffle tickets get heckled, but I guess you guys, maybe you can do that in the chat box. Next up, we've got another Dynafit trucker, a Tahoe Backcountry Alliance buff, and a Dynafit ski strap, which everyone needs. Our winner is Matt Taylor. Congrats, Matt Taylor. Okay, next up, we have another set of his and her Black Diamond beanies, as well as a copy of DPS's seminal road trip ski bum work, The Powder Road. It's an amazing book that's out of print. And our winner is Kathleen Walsh. Congrats, Kathleen. All right, next up, we've got a $50 gift certificate to Alpenglow. We have a $200 pair of Lakey backcountry touring poles. Lakey is always a great supporter of Dave's shows. And then another copy of The Powder Road from DPS Skis. It looks like our winner is Ellen Molthrop. Congrats, Ellen. All right, next up we have a $200 pair of Lakey backcountry poles, carbon fiber, 3-piece compactable poles for your soon-to-be powder adventures here in Tahoe or beyond. And these are valued at $200, so these poles are super sexy. The winner is Anna Klovstad. Anna wins. Okay, next up is a his and her set of Nerona Lingen base layer tops and bottoms. That is valued at $300. And here's a few little teasers for you. The winner is Barbara Inyan. Congrats, Barbara. All right, next up, another $50 gift certificate to Alpenglow Sports. Let's see who the lucky winner is there. All right, Blair Porteous. You just won $50 to the shop. Come in and spend it. Next up, we have a North Face duffel. It's a 30-liter duffel for your next adventure when travel is allowed again. We have a $25 gift certificate to Little Truckee Ice Creamery and another pair of $200 Lakey backcountry touring poles. It looks like our winner is Matt Taylor. Congrats, Matt Taylor. Okay, so now we're getting into the bigger items, guys. We've got a 2-night stay at the Tahoe Vistana Inn right here on the North Shore of Lake Tahoe. Amazing venue. And this is courtesy of our friends at Kelly Brothers Painting and Simple Power Solar. And we also have another North Face duffel to pack your adventure gear in when you come visit Tahoe. Or take a break from your spouse or your family, I guess. Jane Newhart Parks. All right, Jane, you win. Jane is a Winter Speaker Series mainstay, really Alpenglow event mainstay, and we love Jane, so congrats there, Jane. Okay, now we've got another set of Nerona items, a his and her set, Hilo Flex 200 jacket, and that's the middle items there. That's a $350 value. And here's a little sampling of what these awesome pieces look like. Thanks to Nerona for being awesome and supporting this speaker series and the shop in general. All right, Steve Worthington. Steve always wins something at the speaker series. Okay, this one I'm super excited about. I told all the staff here at the shop they were ineligible for this prize. We've got a 1 midweek night stay for 4 guests at the Lost Trail Lodge. If you guys don't know about the Lost Trail Lodge, it's an amazing venue in Coldstream Canyon there in Truckee. And we'll also throw in another set of $200 Lakey backcountry touring poles. Let's see who's going to ski some POW in Deep Creek and Coldstream. Jeff Brown, winner. You are fired up, Jeff Brown, wherever you are. Does it say where he is? No. Jeff Brown. Okay, next up, we've got a his and her Nerona Hilo Flex 200 jacket. This is a $500 retail value, his and her set that you will be stoked on to throw in your backcountry pack to keep you warm and cozy. The winner there is Jennifer Cobert. Congrats, Jennifer Cobert. You are fired up on free Nerona gear. Cool. This next prize is donated by our friend Keith Davis from Keith Davis Aviation. He's offered to fly one lucky winner around the Tahoe Basin just to see the beauty of where we are lucky enough to get to live, or to scout backcountry lines, or to just have a great day scoping beautiful mountains. It's $1,000 or more value, and let's see who's going flying with Keith. Michelle Hochrein, Hochrein. Congrats, Michelle. Keith is an awesome, just a great person in our community, and you'll be stoked to hang out with him. And he's a very safe pilot. Next up, we have another Nerona set. Nerona was generous enough to essentially kick down a bunch of raffle prizes for Dave's show. Dave's sponsored by Dave, so we don't lean on his sponsors. We just bring in some other friends. And this is a Trollveggen Primaloft jacket, men's and women's. And that blue one there. This is the women's color. You can pick your color, that blue one. And this is the men's. Let's see who wins that. This is about a $550 retail value between the two jackets. Tara Thies, Thies. Congrats, Tara. I think Tara moved to Truckee a little while ago, so we welcome her to the area, and she's an amazing athlete in her own right. And now we have our grand prize. We've got his and her Nerona Trollveggen Primaloft jackets. That's a $550 value. And we have a his and her Nerona Lofoten Hilo Flex $200 jacket, which is a $400 value, as well as a $50 gift certificate here to Alpenglow. So let's do a drum roll for the lucky winner. Everyone's crossing their fingers at home. There's a lot of names flying around. And the winner is Sarah Pearsall, Pearsall. Congrats, Sarah. So that concludes the raffle. I'm so stoked to move on here and get closer to Dave Nettle. And excuse that little technology blip there. This is our first rodeo on this new expedition to these unknown mountains. But normally these shows take place at Squaw Valley Alpine Meadows in this massive meeting hall. They are boisterous, rowdy events where our community, regardless of particular walk of life, shows out in massive numbers, usually 600 or more people per show. And the result is a palpable energy that I have rarely encountered in my entire life. And for me, it is an absolute thing of beauty. And when COVID hit, I knew we wouldn't be gathering as a community and experiencing this energy. And while I miss the hugs and the high fives, I firmly believe that this is the next best thing that there is. And there's definitely a silver lining to everything. I'm very excited that many people, some of whom are tuning in from all over the country, are now able to join us tonight and be inspired and educated by the Winter Speaker Series. Now, normally I like to start each show by asking that everyone in the audience lean over and give their neighbor a big hug. Even if they're a complete stranger or a stinky climber or someone you've never seen before, it's just a really fun exercise. And then I might ramble on about Maslow's hierarchy of human needs, or how in order to feel truly fulfilled in life, it's imperative that we feel connected to others. So in that vein, tonight I'd like to speak briefly about the power of community. For hundreds of thousands of years, we humans have lived in close-knit social groups. And back in the day, actual survival was dependent upon collaboration. Now, I think that still holds true today. And while we find ourselves in an almost unthinkable and polarized society with problems so large and heartbreaking that they can sometimes seem suffocating and hopeless, I really truly believe that we absolutely cannot lose hope. There's still an age-old template for community success and progress, and I believe this starts by making our own communities better. The first way we do this is by chasing our own dreams in the mountains. Everyone who lives in the mountains or at the coast or is dedicated to a sport understands that this unbridled joy that we receive through these spiritual feats, they make us better. They make us more kind. They make us more empathetic and compassionate. The second way I think we can improve our communities is by outright supporting individuals and groups that need our help. Author and Holocaust survivor Elie Wiesel tells us that human suffering anywhere concerns men and women everywhere. And it's no secret that COVID-19 has wreaked havoc on many in our North Tahoe community, particularly in the nonprofit sector. These groups are paramount for keeping the fabric of our community in one piece, and they need our help now more than ever. Quiet Karma is the tagline of our anonymous donor party fundraising initiative. And it is on strong and awesome display here tonight, along with your generous giveaway purchases. As a virtual community, which I never thought I would say here with the speaker series, we've raised over $60,000 tonight for the Truckee Donner Land Trust. So I'm sorry we're not in the same room and we can't clap and have a big kumbaya, but that is an amazing feat and I'm proud of all of us. Thank you. Tonight is about Dave Nettle. I personally hold Dave Nettle in the highest regard. I'd like to say that I'm standing on his shoulders here at Alpenglow as he poured nearly 20 years of his life into the shop. I wouldn't have the opportunities that I've had without Dave. And Dave he's the hub of the Tahoe and Beyond wheel, and all of us are spokes in that. His compassion, his drive, his commitment to being an amazing person and mountain athlete is unrivaled in my experience. And I'm so grateful and honored to introduce the one and only Dave Nettle.
All right. Well, welcome. This is the first of the Alpenglow Winter Speaker Series virtual presentations. And before we get going with my slideshow, my name's Dave Nettle. I've been doing these slideshows in the Tahoe community since 1988. All right, we've already got wine spill. It's going to be a good show here. And for me, a big part of these shows and presentations has always been about bringing community together. And so my goal for tonight is hoping that you guys feel that vibe. I've got my best friends with me here sharing this evening, and we're going to have fun with this show. Oftentimes I do presentations that are more of like narratives of a specific trip or an expedition, but tonight it's kind of a theme based around what's going on in the world these days. So yeah, let's get the show going here. So the title here, Sheltering in Place, or I kind of mentioned the unintentional training for the 2020 pandemic. Little did I know that was going to happen. So for the most part over the decades, I've been climbing alpine climbs for about 50 years now, believe it or not, and I've been very lucky with weather. In this case, I'm going to kind of give an example of the first climbing trip I took with my buddy Bean Bowers. He's 23 years old, fresh off a Knowles course, and met up with him in Patagonia to do a climb in the Torres del Paine. It was an interesting year. There was a lot more snow than they typically have in January. This was in 1997, and we had been told that a lot of expeditions had literally been waiting there trying to climb anything in the Torres for weeks. Nobody had done an ascent. We rolled in, hired this arriero to pack our gear in this little gaucho, but you can even see how much extra snow there is on the mountains. And the Torres del Paine is a spectacular place for alpine climbing. On the kind of the horizon here, we have the south, the central, and the north tower. And a climb that I had always wanted to do starts actually on the other side and goes up to this notch, and then close to 20 pitches of beautiful granite alpine rock on the original Bonington route. So I was 39 at the time, and I had quite a few expeditions under my belt. And I've actually included this picture here with a little nod to Brendan Madigan here, who still wants the mustache to come back. I've been told that not many people can rock a mustache. I'm not sure I qualify, but in this picture it's clearly rocking me. So anyway, it's part of the fun. So I had kind of had this method that I used with especially climbing partners that I climbed with for the first time, as I would always kind of be like, well, let's just kind of go up and take a look. We can always turn back if it's not right. And you kind of just ease them into commitment. It was great. So we had been there only 3 days, and again, there was probably a half a dozen expeditions in the base camp there for Torres, and nobody had climbed anything for like weeks on end. Morale was low. We come tripping on in there, and at 7 o'clock in the morning, which is not what I would call an alpine start, I tell Bean, why don't we just hike some gear up and cache it and kind of get a look at kind of just see how things look. And so we're walking past the camp, and people are poking their heads out of the tent, go, where are you guys going? "Oh, we're just going to go kick the tires and take a look." We got up to kind of the upper glacier, where the start of the approach it really is to the climb on the central tower. And I'm like, we've got the gear here. Weather's not too bad. Why don't we just scoot the gear up and cache it up at the col, and then we can, come back later. So it's actually a fairly technical climb to get up to this col between the north and the central tower. And we get up there, and that morning it had been a little bit funky weather, but as the day progressed, it was getting better and better, and my alpine radar was starting to tick, unbeknownst to Bean at this point. So we get up to the col, and I love this shot here. It might be hard to read, but his helmet says, "You're not in Kansas anymore," and that was definitely the case here. So we show up intending just to drop our gear. This was an approach day. We hadn't gotten ourselves all fired up for this ascent. Literally, all we had between us at that point was 1 liter of water and a half a pack of crackers and a little chub of salami. This was meant to be a day hike. And I'm like, Bean, the weather looks good. I've been in Patagonia before. Now is the time. He goes, you're crazy. And I'm like, well, that's beside the point. The weather is good. We're going for it. So at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, we actually started up on the Bonington route. 20 pitches of amazing golden granite. This was clearly the biggest thing he had ever launched into, and it was just great. We clicked pitch after pitch, and as we got higher and higher and more committed, we started dropping equipment along the way. You know, it's like not dropping it off the rock, but like, well, we got to go faster, so we'll leave our approach boots here. We got to go faster, we're going to leave our packs here. We probably won't need any jackets. We'll leave those here. And so basically littered along the route, we were shedding weight and scooting up. Near the top, all that early season snow that was lingering made the climbing even more difficult, like kicking steps with the climbing shoes and snow and ice. And somewhere middle of the night, midnight, with the wind already starting to howl, we were on the summit of the central tower. Absolutely amazing. And I can still remember the two of us looking over, because the weather had gotten kind of better during the day, and seeing this long string of headlamps coming up the valley with people planning to climb. And that was it, though. The window was so tight. We rappelled down. The wind had picked up. A storm was moving in. So we did a single rope rappel down the entire route, because the consequences of a double rope rappel and the rope getting caught on the way down was just too high. So we kept 1 rope in reserve, rappelled through the night, got down to the notch just as this amazing sunrise was cresting across the Pampas. And this storm just rolling in. We hit it just right. And this kicked off what was to become an amazing partnership. Bean and I ended up climbing many, many other things, especially in Patagonia. He went on to be an extremely accomplished alpinist, although a very short lifespan, unfortunately. But that was an example of when we hit it right. We got good weather, we were in, we were out. It was kind of like what he ended up later calling the nettle luck when we would go to Patagonia. But with the whole COVID pandemic thing going on, it got me thinking about other times when I wasn't quite so lucky. And Alaska is a classic place where if you're going to get a big storm, it's where it might happen. So this next little story is about a climb in 1989 with Jim Quirk. We arrived in Talkeetna, and back then, man, it was like Wild West. Dirt streets. It was classic on the Fairview Inn at the bar there. It had a big sign on the front door that said, "Hippies use side door." You know, it was classic Alaska. And you'd go around to the side door, because of course we were curious, and there's a big old dog chained up there growling at you. So it was a town that still has a lot of character, but in 1989, definitely raw. And the airstrip now is a beautiful, tarmac, but back then it was just a rutted gravel dirt strip, airstrip. And if that didn't kind of shake your confidence in getting into a bush plane, the litter and wreckage along the way definitely did. So, you'd see these things scattered along the edge of the airstrip. It's like, all right, boys, we're ready to fly. And it's like, not so sure. Anyway, we headed on into the Alaska Range, and for me, one of the great challenges that I had been dreaming of, I had climbed Denali and the Cassin Ridge, but a peak that really stood out that just said, this is the alpine climb of all alpine climbs, is Moose's Tooth. Thousands of feet of beautiful granite just wrapped in glaciers. And at this point in time, in 1989, to our best of our knowledge, the true summit, which is called the East Summit, the higher true summit, had only been reached twice since the 1950s. So a lot of teams would climb up and end up here on the West Summit and say, that's good enough, but it's actually a mile of technical ridge line to get to the other one. I could definitely see why you'd want to stop there. But we were psyched. And there's Jimmy Quirk, 1989, he also worked at Alpenglow Sports with me back in the day. That was actually part of my hiring process when I was managing Alpenglow Sports. I'd size up candidates, not for their retail experience, but potential alpine ability. And it's like, you're hired. I don't know anything about selling gear. I'm like, that's all right. We'll figure that out. Can you swing a tool? So anyway, Jim and I, again, partnered up for many, many expeditions over the years. So the approach to Moose's Tooth is actually pretty interesting, very complicated, winding your way through these little valleys and down through the glaciers and picking your way along. Just spectacular approach to this peak. One of the main approaches goes around kind of the climber's left side up a real complicated glacial, broken up glacier approach, and we ended up kind of forging a new variation with a direct line right up onto the ridge just to kind of keep things exciting. And the climbing was crazy. We actually climbed up this couloir, popped through this like little tunnel, got onto the other side of the ridge, and about this point we're kind of wondering what we're doing with the skis. They're seeming a little out of place at this point. And so we were able to cache those knowing that we were going to be able to ski down the main glacier on our way back. And the views looking down the Ruth Glacier were spectacular, down towards Baril and some of the other peaks. The Ruth Glacier is just lined with amazing alpine objectives. And so as we were climbing, just enjoying that view. And definitely a room with a view. Moose's Tooth is kind of known for some of its wild bivouac spots. And that was just about all the room we could squeeze in there, pitoned into the wall. And in this case, Jim's kind of looking at that going, hey, do you mind sleeping on the outside tonight? So the next day we decided to go for it. One of the advantages climbing in Alaska is it doesn't get dark on you. So when you decide to go for a summit push, you can just kind of keep rocking. And this is the crazy ridge line looking down Moose's Tooth here. The west summit is somewhere way off in the clouds. And not only is it a wild knife blade ridge to the true summit, but you actually have sections that you have to rappel down. And on the original ascent, the team actually left a fixed rope there so they'd have a way to climb back. We only had one rope, so we were like, well, I guess we're going to have to figure out how to climb back out. But it was spectacular climbing, and at some points you felt like you were just balanced on the edge of the earth, kind of where this fin of Cornice snow met the sky with Denali in the background. Spectacular setting. And reached the summit, in and out of clouds, but we're really excited. And the long descent back down the ridge, through the night, again, it was light. We weren't dealing with dark, but it was just nonstop going. And when we finally got back to our base camp, I was like, wow, that was awesome. What do you think we should do next? And Jim's like, don't even talk to me until this line of cheese on my leg is gone. He basically just laid it out there and was just popping them in one at a time. It's like, I'm about 8,000 calories shy after that push. So anyhow. So we were at base camp and we didn't really have a big plan going into this. We wanted to climb Moose's Tooth. I knew Mount Huntington was nearby, and I had read stories of the epic ascent of the Harvard route back in the day. And with no real information, we just said, well, let's go give Huntington a shot. We got a little bit of time, let's give it a try. And this was one of the most amazing incidents that has ever happened to me with a bush pilot. So Doug Geating's pilot here, Dave, lands on the glacier. It was one of those scenic glacier landings where he had two tourists with him, a couple. I mean, like almost literally like the Jimmy Buffett Hawaiian shirt with a camera hanging off. And we walk up to him and we're like, is there any way you can hop us over to the Tokositna Glacier? And at that time, for a pilot to land on the Tokositna was considered to be kind of like one of the big accomplishments of an Alaskan bush pilot, because it's a very challenging glacier to land in. Now it's done very commonly, but back then very few pilots had actually pulled it off. It's a very deep, narrow cirque. And you can see the look in Dave's eye. He's like, I want this. He radios Doug and says, can I hop him over there? And he goes, yeah. So he has his clients get out of the plane. They're standing there on the Ruth Glacier. He rips the seats out of the plane, throws them down, and we start loading up. And he basically tells them, if I'm not back in an hour, go up to the Sheldon hut there and call for help. And they're just sitting there taking pictures. Okay. I guess this is normal. Those climbers seem like they know what they're doing. They're pretty happy. And we go flying off. leaving the back seat and two tourists on the glacier. And we were fired up. And so the flight in there, it's only a very short flight, but you wrap around these eastern wall of Denali, a very rarely climbed side of the peak, but amazing terrain in that area. And then swinging around, it's a little blurry shot here, but the west face of Mount Huntington, spectacular. The Harvard Ridge, the French Ridge, and even at this point, as we were flying around and trying to line up for a narrow landing here in this little cirque, my eye was beginning to be drawn to this natural direct line right up there, which we knew nothing about. But it just seemed like one of those things that you had to do. It was calling to me. And you know it's something big when a glacier pilot lands and he wants you to take his picture by the plane. He's like, yeah, I did it. We're alive. I pulled this off. So anyway, it was a big moment for him. And he took off, and we were psyched. Here we were. We hadn't even been in Alaska a week yet, and we had pulled off the ascent that we had come, and now we were at the base of this striking alpine face. So we set up the classic Type A Alaskan base camp. Duffels aligned. There's probably even a color theme there that I was unaware of, but did anyway. So very fun base camp. Lots of supplies. We figured at the most we were going to be in there for a couple days, though. Very quick. The weather looked good. The very next morning, I think this was day 6 in Alaska, we're on our way up on this, at that point, hadn't been fully climbed route on the west face of Huntington. So the lower stretches starts up the steep snow and kind of firm ice face, but the real crux of this, the west face that we ran into, was about a 600-foot kind of a couloir ramp of water ice with some technical, almost a few sections of vertical water ice, which was very unusual for alpine climbing in Alaska. Usually it's more mountaineering and kicking steps and slugging along. So it was cool to be on a route that was actually very challenging with a lot of technical climbing. Well, we didn't know how long this climb was going to take, so we had pretty heavy packs, thinking we would spend the night somewhere and then make a summit push. But there was no spot flat enough or big enough to set up a tent. We kept going and going and going. And finally, not far from the summit, where our route joined the French Ridge, a little snow flurry started, and so we ended up just hunkering down. We didn't really spend the night. We just crawled in the bags and kind of rode out this snowstorm that lasted about 4 hours, but we didn't know that. We were just hoping so. This is a classic shot of Jim looking at me going, is alpine climbing always this glamorous, Dave? I'm like, what? You shouldn't complain. At least you have a pillow. You know, it might be a stove, but at least he had something to sit his head on. So after a few hours there, the snowstorm, the flurry kind of let up and kind of the clouds parted, and we started making our way up to the summit ridge. One more final little snow step, and we were on the summit of Huntington. Again, 1 week from arriving in Alaska. We had definitely clicked it. The Nettle luck was holding out, and I'm psyched. Love it. The old bomber hat. That's an era piece. Look at that, man. It looks like something out of Fargo. Hey, where's the wood chipper, eh? No, that was a very practical hat. So we descended down through the night, completely tattered, because we had packs with enough stuff for like 3 days, and it was pretty much a continuous alpine ascent. Got back down to base camp, and you can see the expression on Jim's face. I knew exactly what was going to cheer that boy up. Nice light snack of about 8 pounds of liverwurst cheese and chocolate, backed up by a loaf of bread. Classic Alaskan eating right there, man. So we were enthusiastic. The weather was good. We pulled it off. We're like, we're going to be having a hamburger in Talkeetna tomorrow morning. We got this. So we went out there and we stomped out this half-mile landing strip. We even stomped in the words, Tokositna International Airport, in big letters. I mean, we thought we were so clever. And no planes flew overhead. We had a radio, but it didn't reach anything unless a plane was flying directly overhead. It was back old school radios. And so we're like, it's all right. I'm sure somebody's going to be here tomorrow. Well, that night, it started snowing. And it snowed, and it kept snowing. And pretty soon, the Tokositna International Airport was covered. It was closed. And we were hunkered in for the long haul. And what started off as a flurry just turned into one of the bigger Alaskan storms of that season for sure. And we had no way to communicate with anybody. We couldn't let anybody know what our situation was, but we were pretty well supplied. We figured, man, we got easily enough to sit out a week of storming. We're going to be fat, no problem. So at first, kind of like what's happening around this year, maybe at first that whole idea of sheltering in place, people are kind of, oh, this is cool. I'm not going to work. I'm hanging out at home. I'm putting on some extra pounds, and I'm reading a fun novel, right? That's good for a while. After about a week, not so much fun. Storm kept coming in, more and more snow piled up. We're burning through food. We're burning through fuel to melt, snow for water. And you can see here, we've now made ourselves very comfortable. This is the Tokositna Hotel. You can check in, but you can't check out. So this was about day 7 of continuous snowing, just miserable. And about the only exercise that we could really get was just that daily shoveling just to keep the tent from collapsing. But foot after foot of snow kept piling up. We kept trying to radio, hoping that we could ping off of somebody, but it was just radio silence, trapped in the Tokositna with no idea. That uncertainty, kind of which is really what we're dealing with nowadays. It's not really somebody telling you, oh, you got to sit in your house for a week. It's like, you need to stay for an indefinite amount of time. You don't know. It's the uncertainty that gets you. At one point, I hear this kind of chuckling outside the tent. And I look out, and Jim has built this, I don't even know what you would call this, this appeal to the weather gods. He's used some of our remaining chocolates, some shoelace, and he's put this out here please, snow gods, stop snowing. I'm like, okay, we got to get out of here, This is starting to look feel like this was pre-reality show TV, but I'm feeling like, man, if we were on an island, I'd be kind of concerned at this point here. But on day 16 of storming, not of in Alaska, but we had been in that tent for 16 days. We were down to literally a half a pint of fuel to melt snow. It was getting desperate. We were finally able to, you could kind of see in the background the antenna. We were able to beef up the antenna with some ski poles, and we were able to contact a team that had been pinned down on the south ridge of Denali. They contacted the Kahiltna Glacier base camp, and basically the message said, we need to get out of here at the earliest possible convenience. We're out of food, we're out of fuel, and we're definitely out of patience. Fortunately, the weather did cooperate, and the next day, that was where my fingers were crossed. Actually, Paul Roderick, another one of the top pilots in Alaska, they're bush pilots, flew in a couple of his clients, and you can see here, he's a great pilot, but he didn't quite hit our landing strip, and his plane is just augured in there, and it must have been hilarious for them. We come up there, we're hanging onto the plane, please take us out of here. The guy's like, whoa, chill out here. He's like, I'm sorry, there's too much snow. I'm not going to be able to fly you and your gear out. We don't care about the gear. Just get us out of here. So he was awesome. He literally, we practically physically picked his plane up and turned it around for him. He's like, there's a couple of motivated young men here for sure. And he flew us to the Kahiltna Glacier that was just over the ridge. And then Doug Geeding came in, picked us up. And that night, after sitting in this tent in this storm for 16 days, all of a sudden you're looking at green. And you're on the ground, you're wearing these big old boots and all this clothing, and you're walking around in the mud, kind of disoriented. That culture shock of going from complete isolation back into the real world was amazing. The next day, Doug flew in, got our gear, and we got showers. This is a classic shot. It's yeah, Mom, I know I was supposed to call 2 weeks ago, but something kind of came up. Anyway, and that kind of wrapped up our expedition, and little did we know at the time that was actually preparing us for what was to come in the future. Like all great epics, right? They're always preparing you for another epic, probably. So another quick little expedition to kind of relate to the whole COVID times that we're going through now is in 1995 with my Canadian buddy Jeff Creighton there. You can see by the guns on him, he was definitely more of a rock climber, but somehow I had managed to talk him into an Alaskan expedition because I showed him pictures that only showed rock. You know, you can kind of work it out. And he's like, wow, that looks like an amazing objective. I'm going, we're on. And like by bringing a haul bag and rock climbing gear, clinched it. He's like, oh, it looks like we're going rock climbing, you know, but why are we going to Alaska? Anyway, we're back at Doug Geating's. And again, this was in 1995. And at that time, with my work schedule, I couldn't really go in the summer months. That was kind of the busy months. And so I would do these expeditions in May, which is perfect if you're going in for snow and ice. But as we were to find out, it's not the best time of year to go in for rock. So you start off by flying across a beautiful Alaskan outback. And this expedition, we were flying into the Kachatna Spires, one of those legendary spots in Alaska where ice and rock kind of form this amazing cluster of spires and towers and rock walls. But as we're getting closer, even our pilot's kind of looking around going, you boys coming in here to rock climb? It's looking a little snowy, you know, and we're thinking about, you know, the chalk bags we have packed, you know, thinking that maybe we should have brought some extra long underwear or something. But we were psyched. Beautiful place, landing up at the head of the Tatina Glacier, one of the main glaciers in this cirque of the Kachatna Spires. So right off the bat, we realized that we're probably there too early in the season. The temperatures were freezing. Even when the skies like this were relatively clear, you can see the wind blowing the snow off. It was miserable. But, you know, we were motivated and we decided we've got to still check this out. So our route would be from our camp to get over to our objective, which was going to be the east face of Mount Nevermore, which is an appropriate name as it turns out, that had been unclimbed at that point. We would hike over and then on the other side of the col, work our way down through this ice fall and then have to cross this slope where daily avalanches swept through. We'd have to time them. It was not an ideal situation for a rock climbing trip for sure. But this is what we had come to climb. As I mentioned, at that time, it was the unclimbed 3,000-foot rock face of Mount Nevermore. And it was spectacular. But again, you can even see it looks like there's not much snow on it, but that's just because it's so steep. There's snow on almost everything. You can see the ice forming off on the sides. Every ledge was covered with snow. But we were trying to stay as enthusiastic as possible. But even, like I said, when we would have a relatively clear day, climbing was almost out of the question. Everything would be sheeted in ice. So the smart thing would have been to go home, right? But we decided, you know what? We're here. Let's give it a try. And so we ferried our loads over to the base of Nevermore. And the first section of it goes up through these overhangs, double set of overhangs before getting into some crack systems that we hope would kind of lead to the summit. So here we are racking up, not worrying about where the chalk bag is. Oh, I think I left it at camp, no problem. Thing's probably just a solid chunk of ice. And the real irony is that we had our climbing shoes with us, you know, the little sticky rubber shoes, you know, put them on barefoot. Never took them out of the bag this entire trip. So here we are, like just geeks dorking around in plastic double boots, aid climbing, mucking around on this. But it was still an adventure, and we were getting into the heart of it, working our way up through the overhangs and into that upper part of the base where it would get us into that crack system. And just about the time we started to really get onto the wall, the weather turned. And we did this one day of somewhat good weather that we had. It ended and basically wiped us off the wall. And it was a tough call. And you can see even the expression on Jeff. It's like, do we leave fixed ropes? You know, are we really coming back? It was a tough call. So we pulled the ropes with the idea that if we did get a weather break, we would still be able to reclimb what we had done, but we didn't want to commit leaving our stuff behind. So back at base camp, it was full-on wintry conditions. Rock climbing was out of the question. Here's a great shot of Jeff in the classic wardrobe of the day, you know, saying, you know, the weather is miserable, but at least there's not that much snow accumulating, right? You know, spoke too soon. We ended up with a snowstorm that lasted 7 days straight, constantly burying the tent. We actually at one point had to take the tent out and start fresh on the surface. It was absolutely miserable. The wind's blowing, there was nothing that we could do. At one point, I think this was on like day 5 of that 7-day storm, Jeff's like, that's it. I got to do something different here. He digs into our first aid kit, and there's like these cold medicine capsules from like Canada where they like let you put codeine and stuff. I'm like, what are you doing? He goes, I have no idea what this is going to do, but it's going to be better than just sitting here looking at your face. So he takes like 4 of these codeine pills, and that's what he looked like for the rest of the day. I just sat there reading a book and taking pictures of him. Like, all right, well, cool. Well, I guess we're not climbing today. But he was having a great time. And then on day 7, it was a breakthrough. I mean, this could have been a disaster. But Jeff is opening up, I think it was like a little packet of cup of soup or oatmeal. And inside, there's like these little playing cards. We had no idea. And it was awesome. They had these little pictures of like the daytime soap opera stars. And we're like, oh my God, somebody else is in the tent with us now. You know, it's not just the 2 of us. So, you know, day 8 through 12 in the snowstorm, it was at least amusing. You know, we would take turns talking to her. You know, it's like, hey, Heather, what's up, man? How's it going? Absolutely miserable, freezing cold, out of the question. So what's crazy at this point, and maybe some people out there have had this feeling when you were sheltering in place, you're like, I got to do something. I don't care how nuts it is. And with all the storming and avalanches, we're like, I think we just got to get out of here. Now, a week earlier, that would have been out of the question. That would have been a silly thing. But at this point, we're like, I think we're going to have to do something. I've read all the books, and it's one of those things where, like, Jeff and I are the only 2 people there, and he's playing solitaire. It's like, you know, it's like that Far Side comic where there's the island with the palm tree. The island's this big and 2 guys, and one guy's going, you're starting to bug me, Hal, you know? I'm like, can we at least play cribbage together? He goes, no, I got solitaire. So we decide that this is going to be a good idea. We're going to hike out of the Kachatna Range and try to find civilization. We're going to leave everything behind. We don't care. We're going to get out. So to give you an idea of perspective, right now we're up here in this little cirque. That represents about a 6 or 7 mile long glacier. And we saw on our map, it wasn't this map that we had. We actually had one that had more detail, that somewhere we figured about 100 miles downstream, there was a little sign that's on the map that said airstrip. So we're like, well, there's got to be something there, right? So let's just walk across this crazy. Anyway, it made sense at the time. Maybe it was the codeine. Maybe it was Heather's idea. I don't know, but we had to get out of there. So we pack up a couple of days worth of supplies, and we start hiking out of the Kachatna Range without really a solid plan, just like we got to do something. And it turned out to be a total bust. It was not happening. Hiking down the glacier wasn't so bad, but the last mile or so of it, now we're getting into warmer temperatures. The snow was pouring rain instead of snow. We're saturated, and this valley that we have to walk out, we spent all day and maybe traveled 3 miles at the most. It's like breakable snow crust, marsh, head-high willows, meandering creeks. It was classic Alaskan nightmare. It did keep us busy for a couple days, but that was about it. We ended up stopping at one point and going, not happening. We got to go back. So we hiked back up the valley, over the mountain, and back to base camp. Kind of going to be stuck there. We had basically told our pilot, come back and pick us up in 25 days. And at this point now, we're at about day 17 or so. But one thing that I'd noticed was looking down valley, even when it was storming up where we were, it always seemed like it was a little nicer, you know how it is on the other side of the fence. It's a little bit. So we decided we're just going to move our base camp down the valley a little bit. We didn't even break the tent down. We just picked everything up, set it on our sleds, and just dragged it 3 miles down the Tatina Glacier. And it ended up being a good call. Actually, the weather was a little bit better down there. And we got ourselves posted up right at the base of Mount Jeffers, this beautiful granite peak. And, you know, even as I tell this story now, looking back on it, you know, years and years later, I don't know where we found the motivation. We're like, we're going rock climbing. We came this far, And we rallied up and decided to go do a route on Mount Jeffers, 2,000-foot granite face, and we got into it. And again, we left the climbing shoes behind. The weather was pretty good, but the temperatures were freezing. And so it was basically just an aid fest up this huge Yosemite-like wall of beautiful corners. Had a great time. Looking back down, again, double boots, aid climbing, and a wild upper head wall that led up to the summit ridge, overhanging, and pretty much put us to the test and made us feel at least like we were getting something out of the whole ordeal. And this was looking back up where we had been at the base camp, so we knew we were making the right choice. It was pretty nasty up there. And it's great as you're sitting at the belay while your partner's up there slaving away. You know, you have an opportunity to like think about life and contemplate things, right? And you're like, man, that weather's nasty. I'm glad I'm here. You know, all these profound thoughts. But I'm sitting there and like, this is the tag that's on my equipment right in front of me. I'm trying to think of all these profound, like, life is good, challenge, adversity. And there's this like warning, by the way, idiot. Climbing is dangerous. You know, what are you doing here, sort of thing. But we made our way up. It ended up being a long day and a half. We kind of fixed some ropes. Second day, we blasted to the summit and got up on the summit ridge. Freezing cold temperatures, but pretty decent weather. And just in time, as we were rappelling down, the weather was closing in again. And it was great, too. This was a conversation I had. We're leaving all our climbing gear behind for anchors to rappel, and we were like happy because it's like, man, if we don't have any gear, there's like no way we can even be tempted to climb again. We're just going to hide out until we get flown out of here. So it was no problem leaving stuff behind. And sure enough, no sooner did we get down there than more storming came in. This was definitely sheltering in a rough place. So for the next 5 days, we're have this building anxiety because it's like, we've scheduled to have this flight come and pick us up on the 25th day. But what if that day is a storm day? You know, I mean, we couldn't communicate until the plane was directly overhead. And so each day is getting closer and closer to that pickup time. It's snowing, it's storming, and we're just like, the anxiety, it's like, they're not going to come for us. We're going to be here forever. And we're starting to run out of food. We've run out of patience a long time ago. On the 25th day, it still wasn't great weather, but we hear that. And sure enough, they're flying in to try to pick us up. So now we can get on the radio because it's right there, and the pilot's flying overhead, and he's like, yeah, I don't know, man. The light is awfully flat. I don't think I can land because I can't really see where the snow is. And I look at Jeff and I'm going, oh, we're out of here. Quick, grab your duffel bag and get 20 feet over to the right. And so here we are running up the glacier, throwing clothes out of our duffel, starting to peel layers off, throwing gloves, and we're leaving this string of clothing. And the pilot's like, I got it. And he comes and lands, picks us up. We're stuffing everything in the plane, not even taking the tent down. We're just kind of stuffing everything in there. And we're like, we're out of here, and leaving the snowy, sheltering in place far behind. And again, that transition back to the green. And now at this point, we are definitely well prepared for the pandemic of 2020, man. We are shelter experts. So last March, when COVID hit, right, everybody's world changed, like almost instantly. And sheltering in place suddenly became like the new phrase on the streets, right? Things that we'd never even thought about were starting to put into effect. And everybody had a little different idea of what sheltering in place was, you know, because, you know, the information about what we should do or how we should do it, it was all over the place. And so for me, what I ended up doing was a lot of what I would call just spending solo time. And this is my place. Out in the mountains, not necessarily doing anything crazy or extreme, avoiding the crowded areas, mellow slopes, just linking turns, and just being grateful to be alive and grateful that you know, you can shelter in such a beautiful spot, and trying to be as smart about it as possible. Then came physical distancing. You know, a whole new phrase that we had to learn. I love this. You know, they're trying to be cute, but then of course, because we're, you know, human, they have to put the note, you know, actually, don't get 6 feet from a caribou, by the way. You know, it's just like, oh, come on. you know. Anyway, so the whole idea of sheltering in place, as you know, began to kind of morph into more like physical and social distancing. You know, how can we move ahead as much as possible, pursue the passions, but do it in a smart way, in a responsible way. And so for me, it involved doing trips where we were way far away from other people, but again, not taking high risks. Choosing just a few select partners that I would want to be with, you know, as far as being in each other's bubbles, you know. And climbing is a great activity because it does build that kind of trust with your partner. If I have a climbing partner that says, I'm good, I've been taking care of myself, enough said. I've trusted my life with them. I'm going to, you know, trust their well-being and health as well. And going into remote places in the Sierra Nevada where a lot of people just don't go. Sometimes it's because they're off the popular track, but also because a lot of times they're really hard to get to, right? And so, you know, just being a little more creative, but having a lot of fun doing it. So last summer in 2019, I went back into Big Five Lakes in the Western Sierra, Western South Sierra, out of Sequoia near Mineral King with a buddy, Clayton Heltzer. And he and I put up a new route above Big Five Lakes here, beautiful spot. And on our way out, we walked by the Spring Lake Wall, one of those gems in the Sierra backcountry that's tucked way back in there, doesn't get a lot of attention. In the mid-1990s, I had put up a new route on the main face, and since then, a lot of beautiful climbs, modern climbs have been done on the main wall. But to my knowledge, nothing had been done on this central buttress, which if you look at it, is actually as big as the main wall, just set down a little bit lower. So as we were walking out, we stashed a rack of gear under a rock and committed ourselves, we're coming back next summer, which was this summer. So here's Clayton, and at the parking lot at Mineral King, I think the whole idea of masks and social distancing is taken a little bit too far here, but to me, this is kind of on the same level of the great toilet paper crisis. We now are wrapping our cars. Actually, this is for the marmots, not COVID, but it still looks absolutely ridiculous. And we hike back in. The hike into the Spring Lake Wall is beautiful. You leave out of Mineral King, hike up over the divide, drop down into these high alpine meadows, and then you have this spectacular granite wall by a beautiful lake. And fortunately, turned over the rock, and the rack that we had left was still there, although there's Clayton going, hey, bud, aren't these things supposed to move when you pull the triggers? So yeah, a winter under a rock is bound to be not so good for anyone or anything. But fortunately, I had run into this problem before and had a solution, which, you know, so you brew up a little Camelot tea here, work the cams in some hot water, squirt in a little suntan lotion on the axles to lube them up, lay them out in the sun, and you're good to go. So we were ready to get onto the central buttress. So the approach from camp is very straightforward, and we decided to kind of go up the route of least resistance to begin with. We kind of eyeballed this area that went up right next to this big, huge roof. It looked like a nice line of features up there. So starting up, right off the bat, we realized this is going to be some good climbing. The quality of the rock was excellent. Crack systems, right when you thought they were going to run out, you could reach over and there'd be a little secret surprise around a corner. Wide open climbing on a beautiful, beautiful expansive granite. And the views around looking in towards the east here, this is actually the little col that leads over to Big Five Lakes where we had been the summer before. Spring Lake, Columbine Lake, even if you're just back there backpacking, a great way to get away from the crowds and see a beautiful part of the Sierra Nevada. And finishing up after 10 pitches of great climbing, wrapping up with a nice little overhang head wall and then a slab to the summit and a beautiful summit ridge with an easy walk off the backside back to camp. Thought I'd throw in a little topo. Yeah, that's kind of a little sassy. That's kind of high tech, right? A little audio visual. Anyway, that's part of the fun is after doing a climb. So spring fling, because it just felt like there we were at Spring Lake having a great time. So the climb went pretty quick, and that afternoon we still had some time to hang out. And for me, hanging out with friends at camp is a big part of it. And Occasionally there are masks that are actually practical that you want to have, especially when you're trying to concentrate on a cribbage game with mosquitoes around. So the next morning, we had eyeballed what was going to be a much more direct, a little bolder route up this apron, through these overhangs, up through these incipient seams, into this striking corner, straight up to the top. Again, we had no idea it was going to go, but that's part of the fun, part of the challenge and the passion. So gorgeous morning, crystal clear on Spring Lake. The day was dawning nice and sunny. And you know it's a good start when kicking steps in the morning instead of the slope being all icy. It was nice, just breakable top sheet that you could get some nice steps into. And from the very start, the climbing was pretty heads up. Clayton is definitely a gunner when it comes to climbing. And right off the bat, we had some good challenging 510 climbing, working up to this wild kind of collage of overhanging corners. And at first, we weren't sure where to go. But we kind of saw, we could have bypassed them and made it a little bit easier, but we saw this splitter crack breaking through the head wall and thought we'd give it a shot. It turned out he actually gave it a good try, freed most of the crack, but up near the lip kind of had to take a hang, work on it a little bit. But again, you never know what's going to unfold when you get out there. And this is past the overhang, looking down at the little snowfield below, and some gorgeous climbing in the middle section. You never really know the quality of rock you're going to get on a backcountry route. And this was one of those ones where the first time over it, it climbed as good as if it had been climbed 100 times. Just clean, solid, lots of fun. Consistent grade, lots of 510 climbing. Easy, beautiful splitter cracks with just enough vegetation to kind of keep it real. And up near the top on the final pitch, there's Clayton kind of giving me that look like, you know, I think we got a good route here under the belt. And on this particular climb, because of the steepness and the way we wanted to do it, we'd actually equipped each anchor. And so even though the hike off was not necessarily a long or unpleasant thing, we were able to rappel down and get down to the base where our shoes were waiting for us, making a great outing in the backcountry. Yeah, the Spring Lake Wall. So a tradition that started just the year before with Clayton was bringing whiskey, and on the summer before, he brought one of those little kind of like cheesy little hip flask things, and that didn't work out so well. So this year he was more prepared for the situation, brought the big bottle, and classic thing, sitting around at camp at the end after a great climb, and things climbers do, they're like, oh, what should we name it? You know, there's something about naming a climb. And I'm like, I don't know. And he's like, oh yeah, I got it. I know exactly what we're going to climb it. So God, name it. We're going to name it after the whiskey. So Angels and Demons, a great route in the deep in the western part of the Sierra. And the timing was just right. The next morning, clouds rolled in. We had a summer rainstorm, and we were able to head out. In July, I teamed up with my buddy Andrew Osterreicher, and we went down to the Cottonwood Lakes Trailhead, which is an interesting place to go if you think that you're going to try to physically distance from people. It's actually one of the most popular trailheads in the Sierra because it's the most accessible from the Los Angeles area. Although most of us up here in Tahoe don't really think about going there. But what's nice about it is as soon as you get 5 or 6 miles in and you're up on the Sierra crest, you don't see anybody. You feel like you are on your own completely. And so we spent a couple days hiking back kind of deep into the southeastern Sierra to Iridescent Lake, this beautiful spot that I had actually been to about 15 years earlier with buddy Aaron Zanto. And we had been climbing a lot of routes in the area and kind of were running out of time and energy when we spotted this wall. And we had actually hiked up to the base of it, but kind of just didn't do it. And it wasn't until returning this summer with Andrew that we were able to get back in there. And so we're hiking up just to kind of take a close look at it now from our camp. And you got to love a climb where on the approach, you actually have to do some kind of committing sketchy moves here. It was either that or hike way up around this buttress of rock. But this kind of just added to our day each time we approached the wall, a little traverse across the water. So we spotted what we thought was going to be more or less a good line of weakness, kind of following up the right side of this pillar. We weren't too sure about the quality of this upper head wall. It's red granite, which in the Sierra could be good or bad. We weren't going to know until we got up there. but we were definitely pretty sure that we had a nice clean line to work with. So that night, camping by Iridescent Lake, again, a big part of it is just being out there a long ways away. And the next morning, just because kind of the sunrise is coming up over the mountains there, hiking on up to the base of the climb. And clearly we were physically distanced from anybody out there. That was a good place to be, a good choice. And right off the bat, distancing wasn't the only thing physical going on. This climb turned out to be awesome, but a lot of big, wide, meaty, blue-collar, everyday crack climbing. There was even one section where Andrew led where it was like 10 feet of off-width bush wrestling through these gnarly plants, and he did a bang-up job. It was great. And what's fun about putting up roots in the backcountry is you kind of have to adjust as you go. You know, you have an idea of where you think you want to go, but like in this case, I was leading up this nice crack system, and these big flakes were loose and rattly, no bueno. So, you know, it's like, well, I guess we're going over here. And so it's great to just feel how a climb changes as you go, and you just feel out the rock and the route that you're going to take. There's this happy face. Every single pitch ended on a perfect ledge. That was like one of the highlights of this route. You could take your shoes off, relax, rack up, and fire up the next pitch, which was, you know, characterized by great granite, beautiful sunny day, just, you know, classic joy in the Sierra backcountry. And at times you even feel, I don't want to say guilty, but you realize occasionally you just stop and you think about what's going on right then at that point in the rest of the world. You know, it's like, man, there's a lot of gratitude for the moments you spend in the wilds like this with good friends. And we got up to the base of that big red shield, and as it turned out, the rock wasn't very good, but that's all right. We continued up the pillar to the top and had a great view looking out. This is the Sky Blue Lakes, a gorgeous part of the Southern Sierra. Over here by Mount Newcomb, this is one of the pillars that Xanto and I climbed the route on, like I said, maybe 15 years ago. So it's kind of just fun, keep revisiting these places that you've come to love over the years. And then finishing up the route, there's Andrew's classic understatement kind of guy, but that's an expression of sheer joy, believe it or not. He's Mr. Low Key, but it's like, that was awesome. And because we had equipped all the belays, we were able to rappel back down. Picked up our gear and started heading back down to camp. Andrew's also a good rule follower, right? So anytime you have some sort of interaction, you gotta like wash your hands, right? Well, most people just wash their hands. Well, he goes big. He does the whole thing. You never know what's gonna get a little COVID on it, so you gotta go for the big dip. A lot of people always wonder, like, okay, you're in the backcountry like that, you know, you're so much demand on your body and energy. I mean, what do you guys eat out there? It's got to be like some, you know, high technical food. And so this is kind of illustrating, this is kind of the green theme, complete balanced diet. We've got the Mega Stack Pringles and the Sierra Nevada beer off to the side. That one's looking like it's broken. It's already been devoured there. But no, a big part of it is just having fun in the backcountry and having some comfort food. So Iridescent Wall, another gem in the backcountry. About 10 pitches of beautiful climbing, 8 or 10 pitches. We'll find out because we've got a topo. What is that? 9 pitches of great climbing. And kind of last little adventure for this slideshow here tonight is, you know, for me, one of the big changes this year was not being able to take international trips. A lot of people say, "Oh, Dave, you know, climbing must be your first love." And to some degree it is, but for me, climbing and travel and adventure, they all mesh together. It's not just about the climbing. And so trying to be responsible, but still wanting to travel a little bit, headed off to the Wind River Range for a 2-week trip there in Wyoming. It just felt good to kind of bust out and get another adventure. And I had worked with the Diamond 4 outfitters before, packing equipment in to climb. And so typically you would expect, you know, oh, he's going in there with a Wrangler. It's some big husky dude, you know, with a beard named, you know, like Buck or Brody, big old chaw on his cheek. Well, the Diamond 4 has a reputation of hiring, young, very attractive wranglers and very competent. This gal here, was packed in all our gear for the 2-week trip. Savannah Summers, awesome gal, great wrangler. Definitely not Brody or Buck. And dropped off our gear, packed us out. And actually, I was in there just on my own for the first 3 days. And this is basically the view out of the tent. This is base camp in the Monolith Cirque. Almost everybody, when they think about the Wind Rivers, they think about the Cirque of the Towers. And they even just now just call it, oh, we're going to the Cirque. But it's like, oh, which Cirque? So there's a lot of Cirques in the Wind River Range. And this happens to be one of the least visited, most spectacular ones. That's about a 1,800-foot face on the monolith there. Dogtooth peaks, 4 distinct pillars, amazing climbing. So one of the advantages of getting horse packed in for 2 weeks is that you're able to bring some of those key essentials that will allow you to survive for a 2-week period. So I think is that a 2-week supply of wine? I guess so. I guess if you're scrimping, So for the first 3 days, as I mentioned, I kind of just hung out. I had a great time. It felt good. I needed to clear my head. Lots going on in my world. Just fly fishing, hanging out. Nobody else there that I ran into at all. I had one local that kept me company in the evenings, just kind of tromping around, sloshing around, making weird sounds. But my first partner, Dave Vuno, was going to be coming in, and this is like the classic map. People are like, well, how will he know where to find you? And I'm like, oh, I got this covered. And so this was the map that I kind of put together with all the little highlights. And this is base camp will probably be somewhere near here. And as it turned out, it was no problem. Dave found his way on in. Dave and I met years ago in Australia, and we've been climbing friends ever since. And the guy's a gunner, so it was nice to have a rope gun show up in the backcountry for this trip. So the first thing that we wanted to climb was the monolith. That's kind of like the cornerstone of that area. And so after just a day of kind of getting settled into base camp, we racked up and headed up there. There's actually an amazing climb that people are going to start hearing more and more about that goes right up the main face here called Discovery. It's one of the great, hard, long routes in the backcountry anywhere in North America. Definitely above my pay grade these days, but it's been climbed a few times, and it looks like a beautiful route. What we ended up deciding to do was a classic Fred Beckey line from the mid-1960s up the Northwest Buttress, 1,600 feet, a very interesting climbing, extremely steep for a pillar like this. Oftentimes on routes that are in the 5'9", 5'10" range, you get a lot of low-angle slab climbing, but we climbed a lot of very steep corners, some pretty interesting route finding, trying to link up features, which is really part of the joy of these big walls in the backcountry, that it's not just an exact corner system or something, that you really have to piece it together, swapping leads, and having a good time on a beautiful day. In a nice alpine setting there. It's a good shot of Dave just kind of hanging out on the ledge. So when we got to the summit, you can see it's a little bit smoky. This was kind of during the big fire times that was hitting the whole western United States. But this is a view looking towards the west, towards Lizard Head, Camel's Hump, and just around here is where that Cirque of the Towers is, where much more popular. But what caught our mind was looking towards the east. There's these 2 other Cirques in the same valley, Cirque of the Sun and Cirque of the Moon, and definitely needed to go check those out. Just the name itself was like, oh yeah, something's got to be happening. But before that, you got to restock on the calories. So Dave was our chef there. Everything's better with bacon, especially an omelet. So this is clearly glamping. This is not roughing it. This is about as far from those Alaskan snowbound epics as you can get. So stocked up a little bit on the calories. Dave's a photographer, hung out, got some nice shots. And it was wild to think that literally while we were there, I was there for 16 days and only saw 2 other people in that camp. Meanwhile, literally, going back, hit the wrong button. Don't worry about it. Up there is Cirque of the Towers. There was probably 50 to 100 people climbing. We were told it was just out of control. So again, a lot of it in these days is just being more creative about where you choose to go. So we hiked up into the Cirque of the Sun here, and this is a Resolute Buttress. And the route that we had in mind was one that had been put up several years before by a couple of Colorado climbers called Thunderchild, following up to these overhanging systems up to the top. Pretty exciting. A big part of the climbing partnership is all about who's going to get that first lead, right? And there's all sorts of different ways. You can Rochambeau, you can pick to see who's holding the rock. But regardless of whether or not you get the first lead or not, there's always a way to kind of work it if you're out to get it. So I actually got the first lead, which was supposed to stop right at the base of this immaculate 100-foot splitter crack. However, with the 70-meter rope, you can totally bogue your partner's lead. So Dave's way down there. He's a spot down there going, hey, I think you passed the belay. And I'm not so sure. This is fun. Chuck it, chuck it, chuck. Anyway, have a good time. And you can see there, that is just one of the highlights. I'm sure when those guys first put up this route, they were just laughing. This splitter 150-foot hand crack right up the face, leading into some nice steep climbing. And from there, again, very creative, having to pick your way up through some different terrain. Even though we had kind of a rough idea, we didn't have a topo of the route. We just kind of had a verbal, written description. So it left a lot to the imagination, piecing it together, which we enjoyed. Some nice steep climbing. You can see the North Fork of the Popo-Agie River Valley in the background. And as I mentioned, steep climbing, hanging belays, just very sustained nature for a backcountry route. Looking down into the Cirque of the Sun. Very beautiful meadows sitting below you there. So after several pitches, we started getting up near the top, and the route is actually rated 511. Most of the climbing up to this point was 5'9", 5'10", just fun, just solid, everyday crack climbing, lots of fun, a little bit of tricky route finding here and there. But the second to the last pitch was really the crux. And Dave was lined up for that, this little thin 5'11" corner that if you pop off of it, you're going to probably shatter both your ankles on that ramp there. The protection is minimal. It's really dicey and bouncy. And so he's like, Nettle, I need you to be watching me absolutely closely. And so I'm like looking up at him. I'm like, oh yeah, I got my eyes on you, brother. Hawaii. Oh, yeah, that's right, you're climbing. Anyway, you don't wear a chalk bag like that if you want your partner to pay attention to what you're doing. So anyway, gotta love it. But he fired it. Like I said, Dave's a gunner. We had a great time. This is looking back towards the west. That's the monolith that we had climbed a couple days earlier. And then on the summit with a real intricate hike off the top to get back down and hang out in the meadow for a little bit and just stare back up at the climb. Gorgeous route. Thunderchild. Like I said, I'm sure those guys, when they put that route up, were just laughing when they got to the top. So after 5 days, Dave headed on off. He had other things to do. He was really sad to leave this beautiful camp. And my buddy Glenn Polson came in like a tag team. Local Tahoe legend and man of mystery. I never really was 100% sure he was actually going to make it there. You never know. He might have ended up deciding to go to Mongolia or Kamchatka or something like that. But nope, sure enough, Glenn comes rolling in. And it wasn't hard to talk him into heading up to check out Cirque of the Moon. So this is in the Cirque of the Moon. And it's almost the exact opposite of Cirque of the Sun. Instead of having these beautiful, flat, high alpine meadows, there is not a square inch of the valley that isn't covered with talus and rubble, making a pretty challenging approach, and brought us up to the base of this huge Tuolumne Meadows-like slab called the Sumac Point. And we had heard that a couple of routes had just gone in that summer, and so we were kind of following where they went, but also sticking more to pure face climbing and establishing kind of a variation route. Very adventurous. Again, gorgeous rock right off the bat. Just crimper holds, solid, no loose rock. A lot of vegetation around in the cracks, but not on the wall itself. So following these little features of just really gorgeous rock with this spectacular alpine setting in the background. Getting up near the top, we kind of merged with their route for one pitch of steep climbing up this corner that led off to a ramp that led on to the summit. And that's the top of Sumac Point. You can see here the potential for other long routes in the back there are just really good. It was a great shot. A couple of old dogs still kicking. That's Glenn and I go way back, and we've shared a lot of adventures over the years. And it was fun to put up a new route with him in our golden years. And again, we equipped the route so we were able to rappel down. Nice comfy shoes waiting for us. Sumac Point. You can see here, very kind of Tuolumne-like with the flakes and everything, and our route basically followed up there. The other guys that put up a route they called Forest Creatures, and this is kind of more a shout out to them for their first ascent because we kind of wove in and out their line, so we call it Mountain Critters, not too much different. And then beautiful hike back to camp and a nice light snack after a climb to kind of wind down. Beautiful base camp. That's looking up again towards the Cirque of the Towers. It was a fantastic couple weeks there, and then heading out of the backcountry, kind of back into the real world that's waiting all of us. So there's no doubt this has been a crazy year. A lot of uncertainty, and there's still a lot of uncertainty ahead. People concerned about finances, the economy, politics, health. Lots to be concerned about. Earlier this summer, my friend Brandon there, young Brandon as I call him, I remember at one point he goes, "Dave, at your age, you must be worried. You're in one of those high-risk age categories." And I started like, okay. And actually it got me thinking, and I'm like, well, actually, when I was in high school, sporting long hair, short shorts, driving a souped-up Camaro and dating, that was a high-risk age. But no, really, the whole pandemic has hit everybody hard. I don't think I've talked to anybody that hasn't had some sort of adverse challenge, right? Adversity in health, adversity in the economy. But I'm confident that we're going to get through this. I mean, we had the Spanish flu, right? We got through that, or actually we didn't, but fortunately our grandparents, or some of your great-grandparents, my grandparents got through that. And we're getting through coronavirus, and I know we're going to make it because we even got through disco fever. And that was something, when I was in high school, I was sure was never going to go away. I mean, and somehow we got past that. So I'm confident that we're going to get through this whole COVID thing. And there's also a lot of, like what I call silver lining that's come out of this whole thing. It's not all been bad. In the times that I've been guiding this summer on the Via Ferrata, I've seen more and more people getting out as families, just getting fired up and stoked about being together again. Opportunities that we've taken for granted, and this situation has almost forced us into becoming closer to our friends, our close friends and family, and forming these relationships that often get caught up in the hustle and bustle of life. And it's been great seeing people literally hanging out together, but being smart about it, picking your group that you're going to spend time with, making some decisions about it, and still pursuing your passions. So adversity is an interesting thing. It can come at us in a couple of different ways, right? Sometimes we spend a lot of money, a lot of time, and travel halfway around the world looking for adversity. I've spent most of my life doing that. Other times adversity hits us unwanted, right? A 2-week storm, losing somebody who you love, that you thought you'd be with, and they're gone. Or a pandemic, these are unwanted adversity. But, I'm convinced that these times and any adversity and challenge that we have in our life is really kind of preparing us for our future ahead, right? our lives are always going to be a blend of joy and adversity. There's no way of getting around it. And what's really more important is not that we're trying to avoid adversity, but how we deal with it, right? Going out there, still pursuing your passions, but being smart about it, right? Making good choices, maybe switching things up a little bit. And a saying that I've always embraced that I think is especially appropriate here is it's our reaction to adversity and not the adversity itself that determines how our life story will develop. And so what I hope, whoever's out there listening to this will kind of, just be re-inspired to continue following your passions, but be smart about it. Be patient, right? There's going to be some changes. And most of all, be kind to each other, right? There's a lot of stuff going on. Everyone's feeling something here, and we need to stay psyched. So take that adversity, turn it into something good that's going to prepare you for an awesome life ahead. And with snow falling on the Sierra right now, have a great winter. So stick around. We're going to have some question and answers with Brendan here, and have a great time. Cheers. Woo!
Awesome. Welcome back, guys. What a stellar show from the one and only Dave Nettle. Normally we don't have the ability to do Q&A at SQUA, so this is a really exciting part of the virtual speaker series. We are socially distanced, even though
one caribou apart.
Yeah, one caribou apart. I'd also like to remind people before we get into some questions here that we have an amazing series lined up for you. Cody Townsend in early December, Angel Collinson in early January, followed by another free skiing icon, Ingrid Backstrom, in early February, and Vasu Sohitra in the fifth and final show of the series. Just some amazing stories coming at you. But let's get into the questions. I know you guys are excited to talk to Dave. This is from Kate, who we met earlier from the Land Trust, and Kate asks, "Hi, Kate. Can you say something about the balance between fear and preparation/skill, and whatever else is in the mix when you go on adventures like these?"
Wow. All right. Yeah. Well, Kate, that is something that is always on a climber's mind. That balance between what is fear that you should be listening to, that will kind of be more or less common sense and be like, I should listen to this and turn back. And fear, which is also something that inspires us, that it's like, man, if you really want it, you're going to go on. So there's no really clear answer at all. The way that I've answered that in my life, because there's a lot of times as you're moving towards an objective, a climb, an ascent, there's not just one point of making that decision between, is it fear that I should be listening to and exiting, or fear that is what's drawing me there to accept that challenge? There's many little junction points. And so for me, the way I've looked at it is I don't turn back from an objective, even if there's fear. I wait until it turns me back. So continuing on through these multiple decision making until it's very clear that you've got to turn back or that you're going for the summit. I don't know if that answers your question. That's a tough one, and that's a personal one. Sometimes people mistake common sense and fear. So I think, if you have a little less common sense, you're on your way to alpinism for sure. All right.
Okay, this one's from...
We're dodging these questions. I love it.
This one's from Michael.
Michael, right on.
Do you pack a certain amount of food with the expectation that you might be stuck for 20 plus days, or do you start rationing supplies as soon as you realize it's going to be a long one?
This is an easy one to answer. You never know how much food or how many days of food you've brought until the trip is over. So what you do is you don't really sit down at the beginning of an alpine climb and put your food into like little, this is day one, this is day two. You basically start with this pile of food that you think you can actually physically carry on the route. You eliminate as much everything else as possible, and then you finally end up with a load that you think you can actually climb the route you're going to do, and that is how much food you take on the route. Now, that food might actually be 3 days worth or 12 days worth, depending on what Mother Nature dishes out. The idea of how you ration it, no, usually what happens is you eat normally until you realize that things are kind of hitting the fan, and then you begin to ration it, and then you go hungry for several days towards the end. So in the end, you've consumed the same amount of calories, but maybe over a 12-day period rather than a 3-day period. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a tough one. You never know how much food you have until the trip's over. And then it's like, we took 12 days worth of food. We just didn't realize it.
Yeah, and then you come back to civilization, right? And say in Talkeetna you go to the Greasy Spoon, and what's the deal there? You can eat like 24 eggs.
Yeah, you basically are like a boa constrictor. Then you eat a month's worth of food and sit in a corner and moan until it digests. So yeah, this is not like what I would call a healthy diet plan that you would take on. It's more about the alpine climbing. So yeah, take as much food as you can, eat as little as possible in the beginning, and hope that you don't get a 2-week storm. All right, hit me with the next question.
Okay, this is from fan favorite Laura Reed. Hi, Laura Reed. How do you stay positive, happy, fun when you are facing a downturn like bad weather?
Whew. Well, again, that's a good one, because it's getting back to that uncertainty thing that I think I was talking about in the show. When the bad weather hits, at first, you don't know that it's going to be a 12-day storm. Or maybe nowadays you do, because you can get on a little computer or something, even in the wilds. But back on the expeditions that I've mostly been on, you would just be psyched because you've climbed, you're out there, you're with your buddy, you've got a stack of novels, life is good, you're not at work. And you have to stay stoked, right? It's not about just being happy when times are good. I have to honestly say that even when things were hitting the fan and you've got to pull on that storm gear and grab the shovel and go out and dig the tent out, that's part of life, man. That's the balance, man. You're always going to have a blend of joy and adversity, and I'm okay with that. So stay fired up, man. Right now, this year, I guarantee you I got a ton of adversity in my life, and I'm as stoked as I've ever been about life. So dig deep and make it happen.
First is just an opportunity.
Yeah, it is. Exactly.
Okay, this one's from Brent.
Brent.
What is your number one spot you'd like to visit post-COVID?
Whoo. So I've always dodged the questions where people go, what's your favorite climb? Or what's the hardest climb? Because these are questions that really have to do not so much with what you think, but when they happened in your life. Like, probably one of the scariest things that ever happened to me was not like on some Himalayan peak or Trango Tower or deep in Kyrgyzstan, but when I was like 14 years old in Joshua Tree, sketching on a route and all the protection falling out. So these favorite ever questions are tough ones, but I always answer that the 2 favorite spots in my life that I love to travel is Northern Italy and Southern Patagonia. Those places both embody the ultimate blend of climbing pleasure, cultural excitement, good food, good wine, awesome people. Yeah, if you drop me into Northern Italy post-COVID, I'm going to be one happy climber.
Good coffee, too, in both spots.
Good coffee. A lot of good things going on. All right. These are easy questions.
Yeah.
No one's asked about the mustache.
Yeah.
That's a hard question.
Yeah. Well, what's the answer?
Oh, not coming back.
It'd be sweet if the Camaro came back.
Yeah, the Camaro, I might rock that again. If anyone knows another 69 Corvette yellow Camaro for sale with mags and an 8-track tape,
Dave's your guy.
It's got to have the 8-track tape.
Yeah, totally. Well, I have a question.
All right, hit me.
So I know you've been giving shows since you were in high school.
Yeah.
To your mom's friends, is what you've told me.
Yeah, yeah.
And here we are in 2000 and almost 21. And I was lucky enough to score a Dave Nettles slideshow in a friend's living room when I moved here in the early 2000s. And it really changed my trajectory as a mountain athlete and whatnot. So I guess my question would be, you've been involved in all of these, presentations for so many years, and you've gave back to the community so much. How does that, looking back on it, how does that make you feel?
I mean, it's not even looking back on it. To me, the question you ask is, how does it make me feel even now, today, and looking forward? It's an ongoing thing that I enjoy doing because I love interacting with people in the oral tradition. I think storytelling is an important part of who we are as a community, as a people, and just even between friends. Even on climbing trips, you're out there climbing a peak, but the time you spend in a tent and so on, you're telling stories to each other. You're sharing your life. It's a way of acknowledging not only who you are, but inspiring other people to go out and push and challenge their dreams. So for me, that's always been a big perk, and I don't see that changing in the future. This is definitely a switch, doing it where I'm pointing at a camera instead of looking at a room full of crazy friends, but we're going to make it happen as much as we can.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's all the questions we have time for.
Good.
So,
I'm
Dave,
sure there were some pretty sketchy other ones out there that we're dodging, but that's good.
Yeah, there was a few heckling questions from Alpenglow Expeditions, but we know where they were.
Yeah, well, I'm sure they'll ask me in person, but no, I think it's really important that thank you for everybody for participating in this. It's huge that we keep this event alive in the community. Spread the word, check out the other shows. Alpenglow Sports is dear to my heart, and it's a big part of our community. So thanks for sharing, and have a great winter out there.
Good night, everybody. See you at Cody Townsend early December.
Yep. Cheers.